and I've been stopped by two Syrian women. They could smell my Syrian blood, and just asked me whether I spoke English. So I told them, I asked why. They wanted to go to see a Greek lawyer, but they don't have the language to communicate. I went with them. And the story was incredible. A woman with 6 children, Syrian woman with 6 children living in Moria, got her second rejection. So there is no chance to appeal. And she has to look for a lawyer on her own. And she doesn't speak the language. She can't do nothing. What is more incredibly, what this woman told me, and she has a medical report about her medical status. So she tried in Moria to commit a suicide. Can you imagine what she told me? I said, why have you granted asylum by doing this? And she said, Amani, what could I do? They were imprisoned for a while in order to be deported. So she heard her youngest son asking his sister, why we are here in the prison? Are we criminals? And his sister just said, our mom brought us here. And the son said, I hate her. And the woman just thought that what could I do to get rid of these emotions or to make my children's life easier? So she thought that if she kills herself, then her children will not be sent back. They will be safe. So that's why she tried to kill herself. This is one example. And there are so many more, so many. Actually, the violence in Moria varies. The violent practices vary. Sometimes it's a fight between the homogeneous community, because the majority in this camp right now is Afghans, and with the small minorities from different nationalities. Sometimes it's between the majority and the minority. And there's no level of security or safety in this camp. Another story, there are so many stories, I don't know if I have to share them all with you. Another story, I was also told by a woman that in order to go to use a toilet at night, you should be guarded by many people. You have to surround yourself by a group of people in order to come back safely. These two women went to the toilet, and there are 2 men followed them to their places, to where they live. And they stole them, all what they have. And the women were screaming and shouting, but nobody dared to help them. Not even the police interfered or stepped in. So the police, unfortunately, is not involved. And people have to protect themselves by themselves. And imagine when there are so many single moms or single women, they don't even have family support or whatsoever. So this is the life in Moria. How is the life in Moria like? Moving to the center, to where I'm living, actually in January, yes, in the middle of January, I woke up in the morning to see all shops were shut, and I wondered whether it was a national holiday or what is the reason behind. In fact, there was a strike, but at that time we couldn't figure out, is this strike anti-refugees or to support them. So what we heard afterwards, that right police came to Mytilene from Athens or from other islands, I'm not sure about from where they came, and trying to expand the misery of Moria. So they want to build another camp, and locals were totally against it. They after that, after closing of or after striking for almost 4 days, they could add pressure on the police to leave the island. Uh, After that, they organized huge protest, and the logo of that protest was literally, "We want our life back," as we are invading their lives. So they don't want refugees on the island because we are influencing the level of tourism, as the majority believe. And ever since, we have been facing unprecedented wave of racism. Let me tell you about my personal experience. I remember when a group of fascists came from other parts of Europe, as I was told, to support their counterparts in Mytilene to kick the refugees out. I was personally told by my European friends, and also with by my boss, to stay at home, and that was January, before the spread of coronavirus. And I was in turn telling all my friends who are visibly, as me, recognized or identified from our appearance, external appearance, as refugees. So we had to stay at home for almost 10 days. Before that, this is before the spread of coronavirus. When the coronavirus finally arrived in Mytilene, I really felt this is the most peaceful time in my life, because now I can go out without looking around me all the time, because without living in fear. I was actually told during the racism time to go out of the island. My boss told me, "You can come to Switzerland for a while till the situation calms down." And I really rejected that. I knew that my life is in danger, but what I told her, that I have already fled my country, and I don't want to experience this one more, but also I really and deeply reject to live in fear all the time. It's impossible. I'm also as a human as anybody else. Whether they accept me or not, I am in Greece. So, and I'm legally staying in Greece. Then when the coronavirus came, and my outdoor activity was really limited, just as other people. But I'm still, so this is, as I said, it's the most peaceful and resting time in my life. I felt that I'm just being equal to all people. But after 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 a month, maybe, the restrictions were relaxing, and we could go out. We could start going out freely the time we want. So the first uh, confrontation was when I went to a shop which I'm a regular customer there. So the man who's there knows me perfectly. This man sounds really welcoming and trying all the time to to break the ice between me as a refugee and the community, the Greek community. And he starts always to speak with me and say and ask me how's life and so on. But this is only when the shop is empty. If he has anybody who's Greek, he will never speak with me a word. And after after relaxing the restriction, the first time I went to that shop, there was a Greek woman in her 50s, started to speak angrily. I don't speak Greek at all, and I don't understand even Greek, but I could tell from her facial expression that she's talking about me. So I asked the man, what is wrong? And he said, could you please go out? She doesn't want me to be with her in the same place. I said, but the shop is quite big. And there is more than 2 meters between me and her. I'm not getting close to her. And he said, that's what she wants. And of course, she's Greek and she has a priority. I agree that I may be incubating the virus, but she also could put my life at risk. So why I'm not afraid of her, and why? I don't know. I have no explanation actually. Well, examples are really many. So, and I don't know what to share and what to say, but the tale of asylum in Greece is endless. I can't in this limited time to speak about everything and include all the details. So, but from my experience, as all refugees say, this is not Europe for us. This is not Europe. And one thing I just forgot, that during the racism time, even NGOs, including international volunteers and some refugees, were being attacked. I don't know. I don't understand why Greek people, not all all of Greek people are against NGOs, but the majority, sadly, are against them. So I don't understand why these people are coming here, or these NGOs are here to ease the hardship that people have to cope with. They often say that we could survive a lot, and we took a great risk to come to Greece, so we could find our way without getting help from NGOs. That's could be true. We actually took a great risk, but from my perspective, I realized that even the strongest spirits find it very difficult to cope with tragedies and the hardships that this asylum's life brought about. So help is needed in Lesbos. And as I said before, I thought things will get better, but it's getting worse and worse. I wish with my humble English, I could provide you with an overall picture. And you can now imagine how difficult is it for people to live on the island. Actually, nobody wants to stay either in Mytilene or in Greece in general. They want to see Europe. They want to see the other face of Europe, the second face or the real face of Europe. This is what we are here for. We moved from hardship into another one. And I mean, it's so hard to live in fear all the time also. And 10 years, or I don't know, since 2012, I've been suffering a lot. And I am an example, as there are so many Syrians, so many Somalians, so many Africans, so many Afghans who also suffered a lot in their countries. And they came here, unfortunately, to suffer again and to fight when they are running out of energy. I think we don't have more energy to fight for basic rights. And as a Syrian, I have never thought once that in Europe I have to fight for very basic rights. That could be in Syria or in another developing country, but not in Europe. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Teresa, and thank you very much, Amani. It's a very, very powerful story. Thank you for sharing. I was born in Greece and I have still family there. I can personally relate to shameful practices of the Greek government, of the people you described, full of racism and hate, and how people are forced into impossible situations and the horrors you described. Thank you for sharing. It's very, very powerful. We'll have time for questions to Amani and Teresa later on. Maybe we should continue with Marian Liebman. I'll introduce her now briefly. Marian has worked at a day center for ex-offenders with victim support in the probation service and as director of Mediation UK. She is also an art psychotherapist and has worked in the NHS for a number of years. She has run many training courses in restorative justice and art psychotherapy in the UK and overseas. And in 2013, she was awarded an OBE for services to social justice through art therapy and mediation. Over the past 4 years, she has helped the Borderlands, a drop-in center for refugees and people seeking asylum, with the Art Table. The Art Table is an effective way to connect with people beyond the language barriers, and Marian has recently co-produced with colleagues a manual on how to work with this. She has written and edited 13 books, including Restorative Justice and Art Therapy and Anger. It's great to have you, Marian. Thank you.
Okay, so it's good to be here, and I think we're all quite affected by some of the stories that Amani has been telling. So in some ways, I'm working at a different end, in that I'm working with refugees and asylum seekers who have somehow made it to the UK, and they can attend, or when coronavirus isn't with us, they have been able to attend a refugee centre in Bristol. And there's several different ones, so that there's a kind of spread of different organisations over the week. And I think quite a lot of people here will know which those organisations are. The one that I work for is called Borderlands, and it is a drop-in centre, and it usually operates on Mondays and Tuesdays. And in common with a lot of other centres, we have an art table. And I'm going to tell you how the art table works and then show you some slides. So the art table is just a table with lots of art materials. Here's a picture of it. And it's a place where people can come and do some art. It's not an art class. We don't teach people how to do fine art and perspective and so on, although of course we'd help people to get started and choose the right materials. It's not art therapy as such, because we don't have a sort of a brief to personally improve people, but people may learn things and people may get a lot of benefit. And just to go through some of those benefits, I think the first one is creativity, which is why this talk is about creativity. the opportunity to be creative, I think, is very important for everyone, especially people having a hard time. It's a safe space that people can come to, and it's a place where it can provide a welcome for shy people. Often the drop-in centres may have anywhere between 70 and 100 people all milling around. So if you are new and it's your first time there, it may be quite demanding to join in with that. So to have a safe space where people can quietly do some drawing is important. And I think also the opportunity to do something which doesn't depend on words. You know, people are mostly struggling with English as a second language, and it's very difficult for them to explain, as I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with when we go to another country, to try and explain our wants and needs is quite a tall order. So to have an opportunity to do something that doesn't depend on words is a real relief. And of course, many people as well, where they've come from, they might have been farmers, they might have been engineers, and they're used to using their hands, and so the opportunity to use your hands is also important. And by and large, people find it relaxing to do some art. They can play and sort of experiment with media. And I remember one time we got hold of some little bricks. They were kind of made of clay, and people were playing with these and building arches, building houses, building walls, knocking them down, trying again. And in the end, it involved everybody around the table. So, you know, it's a table for everybody, but it's also particularly important for people who come with an arts background. There are a number of people who have been artists or sign writers or done creative occupations in their countries of origin, and for them to kind of find an art table full of art materials is like gold dust for them. Then, of course, you know, at the art table, you can see the shape of it. We put two tables together, so it's square, and that also means that conversations develop sort of round the corners or side to side. And these conversations developing from what people are drawing or painting or modeling can be very important, and helps to build connections. So connections between refugees and asylum seekers themselves, refugee sort of connections with the volunteers, that's us, and through that kind of connections with Bristol, because we know that the Home Office specialises in providing a hostile environment, and we kind of feel it's our part to try to be a non-hostile environment. And then sometimes just the absorption helps people to stop worrying about all their different things, to be absorbed in a quiet activity that takes up all your attention. And people often say, well, while I'm doing the art, then my headaches go away, or I'm not thinking about my next step, or the fact that I don't have a roof over my head, or I'm worried about the next meal, and so on. So that our role as facilitators, it kind of has lots of bits to it. The very basic is, as you see here, it's providing the materials, but then also the help to get started, you know, to try and find out what people would like to use. And we found it quite important to have some good quality things of pencils and coloured pencils, because a lot of people, that's what they know. And to try and fit the right material to the right person, and then maybe help them to get a bit adventurous and try something else. And we're a kind of low-key presence. We might do some artwork ourselves, but we would always be having an eye out for somebody who needs something. A kind of accompaniment, we kind of with people on their journeys. And sometimes also people like to put their work up. It's a church hall, and we've found that the other users of the church hall aren't that keen to have pictures around, but we were fortunate to find a carpenter who was a refugee who made a special display board that can have its doors open during the time of the drop-in and can close the doors you know, when we've all gone, and so we can put work up, which people like to do that because they feel it is something that they can contribute. And occasionally we do a group project just to involve everybody. So we might put a big sheet of paper on another table and put a heading trees or autumn or holidays or whatever, or if it's around about Christmas. And we also have a great big map that we sometimes put out because people like looking at that and they can talk about their journeys. So I'm just going to show you a few more slides. So if we could have the next one. So this is by a woman from Sierra Leone. She loves art and she's a very regular attender at the art table. And this is a picture of the houses in one of the villages, maybe her village or maybe not, in her country. And again, she loves the trees and the colour, and it kind of gives her a kind of reminds her of her home. Next slide, please. So this one is a youngish man that anybody here who knows refugees will probably recognise. He's quite tall, wears very colourful clothes. He has some kind of learning disability and he's very deaf, but he loves art. And obviously, you know, that's one of the places where he's at home. And he explained this picture. He said there are steps up at the bottom to the church. And he said, and at the top, there is a priest doing some healing. And he usually uses felt tips and does these very, very detailed drawings, and sometimes tells us about them and sometimes doesn't. We have the next one, please. This one is by somebody from Sudan who said about the picture that it's in two halves, because one is before all the wars and fighting, and that's the kind of the green and the yellow bit, which he said has lots of houses on it. And he says, and afterwards everything is black and charred and burnt, and there's only one house, and it's a government house. So it's sort of quite a sad picture, but it's also good for people to have the opportunity to put down their thoughts and feelings. And the next one. So these pots are from refugee women of Bristol. That they have an art table, but they have a more of a craft approach, doing sort of pottery and painting tiles and making things out of fabric. But I mean, you can see how lovely these pots are, beautiful patterns, beautiful colours. The next one. And these are the tiles, and then one of the facilitators brought in the kind of, you know, ordinary kitchen tiles, and then people were painting using the kind of traditional henna patterns, and I think some of them got fired and kind of made wonderful teapot stands, and it was something that people felt that they could do because they knew the patterns from their own countries, and here was an opportunity to display them. I think we've got one more slide. Now this is the beautiful cover design that our designer has done for the manual that we have just finished developing. It's taken us about a year, maybe 18 months, and it is a kind of guide to how to set up an art table, what you need, and how to go about it. It's a bit of a sad moment to be showing this because at the moment, of course, nobody can have a drop-in centre, let alone an art table. But we hope that in the future that it will be possible again. And we will be making it available as an e-document. So if anybody wants to have a copy, then just put your email in the chat box, and we'll gather them up afterwards. And there's a couple of typos to correct, but probably by later this week or by the weekend, it will be ready to send to anybody who wants. And I think that's about all I want to say, but I'll be very happy for any questions afterwards.
Thank you very much, Marion. That's very inspiring. I'm particularly struck by how precious and healing those opportunities and connections can be for people. So thank you very much for sharing, and maybe you could say a little bit more about that later. Thank you. Can I introduce our last speaker, who is Forward Macedonia, who works as a manager of Bristol City of Sanctuary and is an inclusion advisor to the mayor. A journalist by profession, Forward is the current chair of the MediaWise Trust and Ethics Journalism Charity. Forward was the first person to receive the European Network Against Racism Foundation's award in the individual category for outstanding achievement across Europe. She is driven by the desire to see an end to poverty and racism, and stands for social justice, climate justice, and society's upholding of children's and refugee rights. Thank you very much, Forward.
Thank you for the introduction, but let me start by saying actually to thank Aman for sharing your story and life experiences. It's not easy, it's difficult, it's a challenge, but I really thank you for sharing that. As Martin Luther Jr. once said, the world begins to end when we become silent on things that matter. And I'll really be pleased to hear that you have stepped in, and to share your life experience is very, very important. I really thank you. What we do here, City of Sanctuary, is a national network of organizations and individuals that come together to say, what can we do to make our places or cities welcome and safety for people who have been uprooted in their countries of origin, either due to war, persecution, violence, or climate displacements. We're talking about refugees and asylum seekers here. Go on to the next slide. So we have currently about 130 cities across UK and Ireland. And more specifically, local here in Bristol, we started our journey in 2010, where we felt also as a city to follow the footsteps of Sheffield, which was the first city to give birth to this idea of City of Sanctuary, really, and said, what can we do as individuals, organizations, people, to make sure that refugees and asylum seekers feel welcome, safe to places where they have gone. Next slide. Next slide. So why is City of Sanctuary in Bristol? It's really trying to uphold that tradition and taking that pride to say, as a city, what can we do to make sure that people seeking sanctuary are also offered that space of welcome and safety, realizing the potential of the benefits that migration brings to a city. So we look at the positive contribution of migration, and also be driven by the mere fact that we have to stand for justice. We have to treat each other with dignity and respect. So what can we do as a city? And also, what can we do in order to celebrate that contribution that people who are living in our international city contribute, and building on taking advantage of that, the strength of diversity. That's why Bristol joined other cities to say, we want to be part and parcel of our journey as a city. Next slide. We are very small local charity. that works collaboratively with other cities that I've mentioned earlier on. And we have about 100, currently about 130 organizations across the city that have signed up to our pledge of saying we want Bristol to be a city that takes that prize. We want the city of Bristol to make sure that somebody who is coming into our city must feel, welcome. Of those, we have also about 4,000 individuals who have signed that pledge that Bristol become a city of sanctuary. So one of the key steps that we have taken is to, have all these organizations across the city, academic institutions, businesses, faith communities, and individuals, then approached our local authority to say, do you also share this vision? And which they said, yes, and develop what they call then a community cohesion strategy, meaning to say, if we become a state of sanctuary, what can we do practically to turn our pledge into action? So next slide. So those are some of the, the images when we officially be recognized as a city of sanctuary in 2010. Why that image is very important. It happens to visit City Hall. There's that placard that is a reminder for the city to say we are a city of sanctuary. But what is happening? Does it reflect that we are as a local authority and as a community of Bristol? And we thank that placard that has been donated by a refugee from Tibet. It was quite a wonderful really, event that gives us that mark of where we are. Next slide. So what are some of the issues facing people seeking sanctuary locally and nationally, and some of the things that Aman had already also touched, internationally, as well as Maria? It's about people dealing with people that have survived, trauma, torture, sexual abuse, and also, restrictive policies of inhuman asylum process, which I'm sure most of us, we are not even, aware what does, our asylum system operates. And I don't want to spend much of our time discussing about that, but we know how restrictive our asylum policy is. For instance, people are not allowed to work, and you spend years and years without your case being decided. There's also this culture of disbelief. Your story, nobody believes your story. This is not happened to you. So this issue of fear. There's also issues of detention and deportation, issues of destitution and homelessness, and this really the intolerable waiting. We have cases. I'm sure those people who work directly with asylum seekers have lots of empirical evidence of people who have been waiting for years and years without their cases being decided by the Home Office. So you can imagine the the mental torture, and some of us may have experienced physical torture, but here it's what people experience. It's more of the mental torture because of the intolerable waiting and the issues of language barrier. And I'm sure those are some of the things that art, for example, is good examples of how to engage with people who maybe English might be not be their first language. Second slide. And what we do as City of Sanctuary, we are not a service delivery organization. We work with organizations and individuals and said, what can you do as a school? How do you make your school a very inclusive school? You don't necessarily have to have refugees within your school, but schools are these are educational institutions that are going to bring future leaders, that are going to bring doctors, that are going to bring journalists, that are going to bring solicitors, that are going to bring nurses that may end up being come across refugees. So really, and are trying to encourage our schools to go what we call become a schools of sanctuary. We currently have about 12 schools that have officially been accorded the schools of sanctuary status. We also work with secondary schools where we have ambassadors of sanctuary within schools where they talk. We meet with them, train with them, and they go back to their respective schools and also share with assemblies, talk to their peers, which is more of a sort of a peer mentoring scheme, which I think is very important to ensure that our young people are informed about what's happening. And there are also other welcoming initiatives that are done by other organizations, and try to encourage them to take steps of how do we make sure that people feel welcome. And we also play a very advocacy role on issues that also challenge the asylum system, the immigration system, working with our local MPs, as well as linking nationally within the City of Sanctuary movement and other cities. And we also locally, we have our two institutions, universities, University of Bristol and UWI. And University of Bristol has become a university of sanctuary. We have gone through the process of what is it that they can do as a university. And one of the things that they have done is to also launch their sanctuary scholarship, affording those very bright refugees and asylum seekers who may not be able to access higher education by launching a sanctuary scholarship. And also work very closely with their students as well through the STAR at the university. US also just recently also launched their sanctuary scholarships as well, and they are currently working to become a university of sanctuary. Working with our other faith streams, how do we turn our pledge into action? I'll just run down that quickly. With our sports clubs, for instance, we are working with Bristol Rovers. Unfortunately, because of the lockdown this year, we're supposed to have our usual Refugee Week football tournament, which we call Our City, in partnership with Bristol Rovers. And we also try to extend this invitation with our city as well, so that we use the power, the national power of sport and football in particular, to bring people together, and to also take some refugees, particularly the young people, to some of the soccer matches, football matches, just really build the relationships and make sure that people have access to people who are different from their day-to-day lives. We also develop this sort of strand within City of Sanctuary through climate change and migration, because those is really important that we also not forget that everybody, we are at a point where we can easily also be affected by climate change. We had this last December, where we had quite a very big conference and look at hearing experiences from people who probably been really resilient, who have sharing their stories of living in places, Somalia, quite a very good young person that talks about their experience of climate change in Somalia, hearing what's happening in Beira, Mozambique, with some of our links with the Bristol link with the Beira. Really understand that when we talk about the movement of people, yes, there are issues of violence, but let's not also forget the impact of climate change, which can which affect us all, and how do we want to be welcomed. So it's really important. We also work with our local businesses as well. Next slide. In terms of working with businesses, I'll just give you one example. Through our work with Business West, we established what we call a community initiative, what we call the Transport Fund, in trying to address the destitution issue. People who don't have access to public funds, but they want to go to drop-in centers that some of the charities are running every week, and providing bus passes. And we have established a relationship with First Bus, who also said, as a bus company, what can we do? And they offered us, £300, and we match funded, so we get £600 worth of bus tickets we give to destitute asylum seekers, including women in particular. So it enables people to move from point A, whether to go to their GPs, whether going to a drop-in center to get social interaction, or maybe to go to their solicitors. As you can see in that, some of the people raising for collecting funds at a mosque in Easton for the transport fund. So it's really some of the things that you can also do practically. Next slide. I know we can talk, but individually, what can we do? And Marian's given us a very good example of what's as table, befriending and newly arrived asylum seekers in the city. Let's not underestimate the skills that we have, our language, sharing stories. And today we have really demonstrated that on this webinar. we have been hearing stories, the pain, the suffering, giving the opportunity of just listening to Amani's story. It's very important. And we can also do that, locally by some of the people that live here in Bristol. We can also do, fundraising for, transport fund, or joining, Borderlands, or fundraising for Borderlands, refugee women, Bristol Hospitality Network, Bristol Refugee Rights, or really taking maybe more steps in terms of campaigning. Currently, there's this issue around asylum support. This issue about campaigns around lift the ban, keeping on letting our MPs know. There's issue also around the no recourse to public funds. These are issues that we can also, involve, that some of that would really help to create a welcoming, environment. We all come from different experience, knowledge, and skills. Those skills are very valuable within some of the voluntary sectors, within the organization that works with refugees. There are people that runs, mentoring, projects, Borderlands. So all those, professional background that you have is really vital, that you can all contribute to some of the agencies and creating a platform for refugees also to come and speak at your, respective organizations or neighborhoods or wherever you are. So it's important that we can also, join together within our subgroup. We have, as I mentioned earlier, schools, we have our faith, we have our higher education for the universities, we have our campaigns group, we have our fundraising, we have our media and communications, and more practically, providing shelter, food, clothes to drop-in centers. Yes, they've been currently be closed, but there's people that needs to be kept on, somebody making an effort to make those, welfare calls to people. So first step that what we do within City of Sanctuary is to have all individuals and organizations to sign what we call a pledge form to say, yes, we share with the City of Sanctuary vision. Then we work together and say, look at how can we then take 10 words of compassion into action? What is it that you can do to make sure that practically, depending on your time, the organization that you work, how can you also contribute? Those are some of the things then we can talk to, individuals or organizations. Next slide. So I'll just really whiz through very quickly on what things that we can do, locally. But maybe one thing that I wanted to leave with you is that image of penguins. I like it very much. It's really, really, significant for me. To those who follow what penguins do, they guard jealously their young ones. They will provide them with food when they eat. They provide them. So we as human beings, I think we can also demonstrate our solidarity and treat each other with dignity, providing that safety to each other, to our brothers and sisters that have been seeking sanctuary. And we have the capacity to do that. And sanctuary it starts from our own hearts. If we believe what we say from our heart, we can also extend it to people whom we may look as if they're different, but actually we are the same, and we are Bristol. And I hope that together we can contribute to make our places of welcome wherever you are, whether you live in Bristol or in other cities. There are lots of cities that are on board, rural areas that are also join the movement or the network of organizations and individuals that are part and parcel of City of Sanctuary. Last slide. I think to end really, I know I've been just very fast, but what I just wanted to end is there's a lot of things that have been said today, and some of the things might be look at it as an individual and say, what can I do? The challenges might look as if they are big and they are huge, but actually what inspires me most, particularly with the work that I do every day, I'm inspired with the words that Martin Luther King Jr. said, that faith is taking that first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. So I believe that if we believe strongly in justice and peace and love, the way forward is open. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Forward. That's amazing and really inspiring and hopeful presentation. I was really struck how much you highlighted the importance of solidarity and how we can all be playing a role, and how the work you're doing is life-changing, not only for the people involved, refugees, but everybody doing this work. So thank you. I'm also really struck by how many people asked for the manual, Marion, that you created, which is another kind of a hopeful thing we can see here on the chat. So thank you all for powerful stories, reflections, for sharing your work. We'll have 20 minutes to have some reflections, discussion, questions, maybe to all of our panelists or anyone that you might want to ask specifically a question. You can write your question on the chat, or you can unmute yourself and you can ask the question if you would like to. Thank you very much to all. Thank you. Maybe we can take a minute or two to see who might want to respond at this stage. It could be a comment or a reflection, or maybe what struck you from a presentation, anything you might want to share. It's important.
Can I just say one very important thing that I missed? And that is that one of the outcomes of the art table was a book by Borderlands, which is still available for sale, various community projects, including one at the Spike Print Studio, who wanted to extend their hand to refugees. So there's a group who meet there. And also a group of artists have got together and formed themselves into the Bristol Refugee Arts Collective. And they have an exhibition which is part of the this refugee festival. So if you go to the list of events, you can see their exhibition, and they're also doing collaborations with UWI. So don't miss out on their art exhibition, which is part of this week.
Thank you, Marin. Thank you. There's lots of comments on the chat about how people have been moved and how great it is to be here. Anyone might want to ask questions, offer any reflections? You can unmute yourself. There is a question here. Chloe, you're happy to ask the question, or shall I read this out? It's for my...
Sorry, yeah, I don't know why I just didn't speak.
That's fine. You can turn your camera on if you would like to, so we can also see you and then ask the question if that's okay.
Oh, I've got something covering my camera.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks everyone for speaking, really inspiring. I had a question specifically to Amani. I was wondering how, I know it's been asked a lot, but how COVID-19 has impacted people specifically in Moria, and how that's impacted your work and other people's work.
Well, we have been closing our center for 2 months continuously since the start of racism state in Mytilene, and then when the coronavirus hit our reality, we had to keep it also closed, but we have reopened our center actually last week.
Oh.
So the number of, I also forgot to tell you something. Greece is now promoted as touristic destination for Europeans, because, you know, Greece could handle this crisis very, very well. But there is still a population of almost 3,000 people in Moria are confined to this area. They are not allowed yet to go out as us, as the residents who are living in the center. So we are allowed to move freely, but they are not. Actually, I don't think people in Moria are taking this virus very, very seriously. First of all, as Teresa has mentioned earlier, that it's hard to keep social distance between you and anybody. And when you have to share your bathroom and even your accommodation, people, it's hard to take the measures very, very carefully or seriously. So actually, when sometimes I have chance to meet some of Moria's resident, because the only reason, to be honest, they are allowed to come to the town is only to meet a lawyer if they are rejected, and they have to go through the appeal application. So they can come for this reason. So when I see them, they hug me. So I say, it's coronavirus time, sorry. And they say, oh, we don't care about it. Are you taking that very seriously? There's nothing here. The island is safe. I think the reason we are not taking this virus seriously, because what we have been through is much worse and harder. So our lives do not mean, or is not, our lives are not as important. And it's hard to believe it, because everybody, although there are stories of sad and tragedies, but also there are stories of hope and resilience. People want to continue, people want to have a happier life. So I think it's not taken, this virus is not taken very seriously. And I actually just today asked a Greek person who has been in Italy, is it serious? Is this virus really serious? Because I have never met anybody who has been infected. So I don't really believe it. And as I said, the lockdown was the most resting and peaceful time in my life. So it was not isolation at all. So she said, yes, I have friends who were infected. So, I mean, I have my doubt. I'm not sure there is a coronavirus in the world, but we have to believe that there is, or we have to be careful and to take the measures. So in order to protect ourselves.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
Has been affected so much because the majority of our beneficiaries were coming from Moria, that where our work focuses, but now they are not allowed to come to the city, and the center is located in the city, in the middle of the city. So yes, it has been affected so much.
Thank you very much, Amani. Thank you, and thank you, Chloe, for the question. There was a comment from Tinu, who shared a little bit of their own story. I don't know if they would like to say a little bit more, but an important comment about arriving to Ireland as an accompanied minor and how they could relate to the presentation. So thank you for sharing that. I don't know if you would like to say a bit more or not, just a reflection or maybe a question.
Hi, I'm Tinu. Sorry, just in case you hear the kids, they're the ones making noise. But yeah, so I did say that I arrived in Ireland as an unaccompanied minor in 2002. And obviously it was a lot difficult for me because I didn't have family, and I come from Nigeria originally. And I do relate from obviously Amani who's spoken.
Yes, Amani.
So it was obviously a different kind of difficulty that we faced coming from Nigeria, but it was equally as traumatic for me. You know, I had a social worker, thankfully, who helped me navigate, the process. And, I mean, the process of, like Amani had said as well, some people, obviously, a couple of friends of mine had to be deported because they didn't get through the first interview and the second interview and all of that. I mean, thankfully, I was able to get refugee status in the end, and that dramatically changed my life because it meant I could go to university. It meant I could study, because up until then, I just went to high school and my life was at a halt, because there was no way forward. It was either I just waited or paid 20 or 30,000 pounds and euros at the time to go into university, which obviously I didn't have. So once I got the clearance, the refugee status, it just meant a whole new world of opportunities was opened onto me. And every step of the way, I found support. You know, with the Irish Refugee Council, I found support in my social worker who was constantly there for me. I found support in drop-in centers as well. So even though I wasn't getting much money from the government, we're getting 19 euros a week at the time. And I'm going to university then because I'd only just gotten my papers. Obviously that's nothing, that's not much, but just the fact that I had the support, the drop-in center to go to say, look, how are you doing? They were able to buy me bus passes and things like that. That got me through my university days. So from that point of view, I did say that I could relate. And of course, I did my nursing first and then went on further to do medicine. And I mean, I'm here today thanks to the support that I got, because it could have been a lot more messy, it could have been a lot more difficult, it could have been a lot more frustrating, and it could have been a totally different outcome that wouldn't have been this. So yeah, I'm grateful for all of the support. And I think, yeah, people do not really understand what asylum seekers or refugees go through when they have to leave whatever difficulty they've come to face. Yeah, this is a place of succor, this is a place of support, but it's a different problem because you're struggling to integrate, you're struggling to be a part of the system. You're thinking about what you've left behind. For me, I was only 15, I think. You know, I was thinking about my family. So even though people said, oh, at least thank God you're out of that, I still wanted my mom, I still wanted my family. So it doesn't make any sense to me. Thank God that this is better, but I don't have a family with me. So I think it's good when, you know, people are there to support them, because it is a very, very, very difficult situation. Now, of course, I'm married with kids and they don't have a clue and it's different for them. But, you know, when I look back, I know how much the support I got helped me to get to where I am today.
Thank you very much for sharing too. That's very important. And maybe that relates really to another question about maybe before we want to take that, or anyone who have suggestions. People from the hall saying people who don't work in medicine, social work or related fields, how can they practically improve lives of refugees and what could they do? I think it's an important question. I can relate to that, a sense of a wish to do more and sometimes not knowing how. So maybe forward we can start, and other people have other suggestions they can share. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question in terms of your people's career and how do you opportunities for work placement. That's one of the things that really within City of Sanctuary we encourage institutions and business to say, can they offer work placement for asylum seekers and refugees, and also what is they are waiting. I think that's one of the practical things that University of Bristol, for example, is doing with the Sanctuary Scholarship, because there's some of the people not have been able to access higher education in as much as they have the skills, they have all the the necessary papers for them to go, but the limiting fact, the hindrance will be resources. So that's why the Sanctuary Scholarships are also another route of allowing people to so in terms of their education. But really key fundamental here is the right to work. I think people need to be given that opportunity to work for themselves, look after themselves, rather than because it's not benefiting, and it doesn't benefit the individual, it doesn't benefit the society. So if people from the very onset, if they are given the right to work, they are contributing to the economy, they are contributing socially, they also develop themselves as individual, rather than you wait for people for years and years. What it means is you are losing your skills, you are losing your confidence, you are losing, basically, by the time you got your papers, it's really worse. You're starting from scratch.
Thank you for what anyone else might want to add. It's really a central question and something maybe to take away from today as well. Teresa, Marian, Amani.
I'll say something. I think everybody can do something to help. I think from sometimes there are conversations that we find ourselves in, and people may be saying horrible things about refugees, and we can put them right. I can remember a taxi journey, and the driver was telling me how terrible it was that there were so many refugees and how they were taking jobs and how they were, you know, good for nothings. And I thought, what shall I say? And as I thought, I won't say anything now because I don't want an argument, because he's driving, could be dangerous. But as I got out, I just said, oh, by the way, my parents were both refugees. They were so grateful to come to this country, and they worked every single day of their lives. I hope you have a good evening. So we can speak up for refugees. That doesn't take any resources whatsoever. And unfortunately, we still have plenty of opportunity for doing that. And then there are lots of little things we can do. There are food banks that we can contribute to. There are shops that will take when it's allowed to trade again, the ABC Centre on Gloucester Road will take your unwanted Christmas presents and goods and either sell them or distribute them to refugees. And then, of course, there are all the kind of mentoring schemes. And again, it doesn't take a medical degree to be a mentor to refugees or to make phone calls. A lot of it is about being a friend and pointing people to resources of people who are experts. But it's something that we can all do something.
I'd like to just second that. I totally agree with what Marion just said. I think befriending, maybe it's not the best word, but it's very, very important, and it's also very, very rewarding. The friendships I've made with refugees are now some of my closest and most rewarding friendships. And there are various schemes in Bristol. There's one run by Bridges for Communities, but I'm sure there are others too, which link individual Bristol people with an individual refugee, and you become somebody that they can talk to, and you can talk to them. It's just a normal human relationship. And if there's a language problem, you all use your ingenuity, both use your ingenuity and get around it as best you can. And I suspect that for a refugee, feeling that somebody who's settled here wants to communicate with them and enjoys their company is very valuable.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you very much, Marion. And it relates to forward the point you made earlier about not being silent and speaking up and advocating and be present and taking steps, even if they seem small ones, they can be very, very important ones. Thank you. We'll have only 3 minutes left. Maybe very quickly, we can have a final question if anyone wants to share. Or maybe a final reflection from our panel. I can't see any questions coming through. So maybe a final reflection from our panel, so we can finish on time. Amani, do you want to share something before we finish, or any last thoughts?
Well, I'm so thankful for affording me this opportunity and so pleased to meet all of you. It's really important to speak up, but we need people who are truly listening to us. That's what we need. As I've mentioned at the beginning, that we have been informing the world about what is going on in Syria for years now. And still the consequences are they're not as satisfying. Syria is unfortunately still suffering. So, and I'm just moved from misery into another one. Nothing has changed in my life yet, but hopefully it's gonna change very soon. Thank you very much for all of you.
Thank you, man. It's great to have you. Teresa, do you want a final comment?
I don't think I've got anything to add. I'm very pleased Amani was with us today, and I enjoyed hearing from everybody. Just one thing I would say, I totally agree with Forward about the importance of work. I think if one thing could be changed in the legal system, it would be to give asylum applicants the right to work from, as you said, the word go, because I think the demoralization of not working has a terrible impact on people's mental health. And also we as a community are losing out on what the asylum applicants, the refugees can contribute. And it's typical of this mean-spirited government, but it's terribly misguided.
Great, thank you. Marion?
I think I've already said what I wanted to say. I don't think I have anything to add except to ask people to keep refugees in mind and to remember that the creativity of refugees, I mean, first of all in managing to get here and then in managing their lives, and in some cases to actually do that in a way of talks or poetry or plays or art. And don't forget to look at the art exhibition.
Thank you, Marion. Forward, any reflection?
Yeah, I would just say, all of us really, we must listen to the voices that speak their pain and act decisively on what we hear. Our humanity must speak truth to power until every person is valued equally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very powerful. Just a reminder, posted on the chat about Risa Mohabir and the listening projects with refugee women. There is a link there if you want to follow that. And handing back to Vinay. A big thank you to all of you who've been here, to the organizers, to our panel, sharing stories and reflection. It's been amazing. Thank you. Vinay, back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending our first event by Medicine 360. Katie Hall has just posted our first podcast, which will be released tomorrow, so keep an eye out on that. I'm just going to post on the chat a post-event questionnaire for you all to fill out so we can keep having fantastic events like this. Thank you very much for all attending, and thank you to the panel. I'm going to end the call now. Bye-bye.